Tampa Bay Buccaneers from the 48-yard line. Second down, 13. Brady lobs one downfield. Caught ball by Gronkowski inside the 20 to the 15-10. Gronkowski to the 5 to the 4-yard line. Holy guacamole.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking, throws up the middle. It's intercepted at the 40. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25, 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl.
Super Bowl, baby!
This is the Big Nasty. Yeah, Big Nasty. Hall of Fame Tampa Bay Buccaneer fan, baby.
This is Mike Allstott, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you're listening to the Cannon Fire Podcast.
Cannon Fire Podcast, brother. You ain't listening, and you're missing out. Woo!
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Coming back at you today for episode 165. I'm your host, as always, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me, my good buddy and co-host, the Philly Bucks fan himself, Mr. Evan Wanish. And we are not alone. We kick off our Super Bowl coverage with our Super Bowl slate of guests. Joining us today, a 10-year veteran of the NFL, starting center of the Buccaneers from 1983 to 1992, played an incredible career of over 100 games. Second-round draft pick of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the 1983 draft, and a man with an incredible story to tell, and that's exactly why we brought him on the podcast today. Very excited to talk to him, Mr. Randy Grimes. Pleasure to have you here on the show. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited about this whole thing, huh? Imagine the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the Super Bowl at home. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, the chance to make history, you know, as a team, and not only just with the great season that they've had on the back of Tom Brady, this defense stepping up and playing the way that they did, you know, making it to a Super Bowl is tough. And for the Bucs, all the elements coming together this year obviously has to give this city a lot of excitement. And you know, it's the first time they felt this way about a team in close to 20 years. But you know, wanted to get your thoughts before we really get into things. You know, this is a I don't know about unprecedented time for Tampa Bay, but it's, you know, it's just a welcome change to what we've seen from this Bucs team over the last 20 years. What did you make of their season this year, the addition of Tom Brady, and the way that they've ultimately navigated themselves to the biggest game, or at least the second biggest game in franchise history?
Well, and you know, when they signed Tom, I didn't know what to expect. Obviously, I was excited. I love to see those old timers make it, and I love to see them be as successful as possible. But I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how much gas he still had in the tank, and I knew that he was going to sell a lot of tickets. I knew that he was going to cause a lot of excitement, but I didn't know how much of that was going to translate onto the field in wins and losses. But man, you know what that guy brought? He brought so much more than just talent. He brought all that knowledge, and you know, I can't imagine what the younger guys felt like coming back to the huddle every time and having his face, that face of positivity, of you know, the fact that he's been there, and that calmness, you know, in the storm of a NFL football game. I can't imagine what those guys felt in that huddle. And, you know, brings a whole air of and championships and playing well and never giving up. He brings that whole air about him, and that's what the Bucs needed. You know, they're a young team. They needed somebody to come in there and show them how to win. And, man, when you go out and win 3 playoff games in a row on the road, that means you're doing something right, and that you're dialed in mentally as a team. So I'm real impressed with that. And yeah, he brings a great arm. He brings a lot of intelligence, but just that air of winning, you know, that's what they needed so much.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Evan.
Yeah. So of course, obviously, I think one of the big questions coming into the season was Brady is not a mobile quarterback. So how is this offensive line going to protect him? As a former offensive lineman yourself, how did you view the Buccaneers' offensive line before this season? And did you have faith that they were going to be able to protect Tom Brady and have the success that they have?
Well, and you know they've been pretty good over the past, and I was real excited about the right tackle. You know, the young right tackle that they brought in, and that was the missing piece. You know, the good thing about protecting for a quarterback like Tom Brady is you know where he is. You know he's going to be sitting in the pocket, as opposed to a Steve Young who's supposed to be in the pocket, but he was probably somewhere out there running around trying to make something happen, and you could never protect for the guy because you know, you thought he was going to be on his seven-step drop, and next thing you know, he's taking 3 steps and then hightailing it out of there, trying to make something big happen. So, you know, it's a real advantage to play for somebody like Tom and to know where he's going to be all the time, and that's sitting in that pocket. And you, as an offensive lineman, you just got to keep that pocket nice and clean to where he can step up. You know.
Absolutely. And I mean, there was actually a graph that had come out a couple weeks ago of all the remaining playoff teams, and it showed the point of release in the pocket of the quarterbacks, like where they had thrown the ball from this season. And it was just a drastic difference between a guy like Tom Brady and then, you know, Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and where they're throwing the football, because the majority of the red dots that represented him letting go of the ball are directly behind your center or your interior guards. You know, he really doesn't roll outside of the pocket that much, and when he does, he's usually able to make a play, but he's got to have more than enough time to do so. You know, one more question I wanted to ask about this year's offensive line. There's a couple of great guys to watch. I mean, is there a player that you have come to enjoy watching? You know, Ryan Jensen, I think, played like an all-pro center this year. You got Ali Marpet, who's an absolute dog. Tristan Wirfs at right tackle, you had brought up, who I think has been, without a doubt, the best rookie in the draft class this year, but being, you know, one of those big uglies on the front offensive line, he's not going to get the credit he deserves. But is there any guy on that line that has kind of, you know, surprised you or just been fun to watch?
Well, and Wirtz has been somebody that has been fun to watch. You know, I think he should be Rookie of the Year. I think he's had that kind of year where he's come in, he's played every game, every snap, and given up limited amount of sacks. I think, and you probably know, but it probably I could count him on one hand. Jensen has been awesome to watch. He's you know, I compare him a lot to Ron Heller. And the way he plays, he's aggressive. He's always looking to pick a fight. And that's good. You know, that keeps the defense on their toes. And I like the way that they're all downfield blocking. You know, there's more than just doing your one assignment. It's also getting downfield and picking off somebody else. So, you know, I'm just real impressed with the offensive line play. And I think that's the big difference. And, you know, that gives Brady a lot of confidence where he knows he can drop back and step up without having anybody crashing in on him or hitting his hand on a helmet and things like that. But it also says a lot for the receivers that they're running their good routes, that they're getting open, that the timing is all working, and everything that they've worked on back from when he used to have those practices at the high school back before the season. You know, everything's paying off. All the work that everybody's put in is paying off, and they're just gelling as a team.
Absolutely, and it could have come at a better time. I wanted to shift focus and talk to you about your playing days. You did play 10 seasons for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as their center. You were taken in the second pick of the second round of the 1983 draft, pick number 45. Wanted to get your thoughts on what your draft experience was like back then, and ultimately your first impression of, you know, not only the NFL but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Well, I was so excited to be drafted by the Bucs. First of all, I was an East Texas kid who had never even seen the ocean. So coming to the seaside community of Tampa, Florida was exciting. You know, I had just gotten married after my junior year in college. So it was me and my wife. And, you know, I can remember getting that phone call. This is back before green rooms and G5s and flying people to drafts and having all these big parties. You know, it was me and her sitting by a telephone in Waco, Texas at Baylor University waiting for a phone call that I didn't know where it was going to come from. But I remember a call from Coach McKay and saying, "Hey, Randy, Coach McKay, we just drafted you. See you tomorrow. Click." And I was like, "Oh, wait, where's Tampa?" I didn't even know where Tampa was. And but I was excited, you know, not only to be coming out there to start our family and my career in pro football, but it was they had just gone to the playoffs a year before. That was the strike shortened 1982 season, and I was excited. Little did I know that over the next 10 years, I would have 5 different head coaches, 6 different offensive line coaches, probably 6 or 8 different quarterbacks underneath me, and a couple of different general managers. It was a revolving door during that decade I was there.
Yeah, and I mean the Bucks obviously over the past 20 years have been through that revolving door a bunch recently. What does that do for a player when you don't know if you're going to have the same head coach or the same offensive line coach or the guys next to you? It's just so much uncertainty. What does that do to a player's mindset?
Well, it screws you all up, that's for sure, because you can never get any consistency going. When you've got a new playbook thrown in front of you every 2 years, is basically what I had. You have to learn not only a new system, but you've got to learn new personalities, and there's new loyalties, and there's just no consistency at all. And that's one of the reasons why, other than some really bad drafts, that's one of the reasons why we really never got anything going. I mean, if you think back, my best year was 6-10, and that's pitiful. I mean, I wouldn't go back and change anything. I loved my career in Tampa. I loved the community and my time there. Made a lot of great friends. But 6-10, your best record, and the only thing you can attribute that to is a lot of bad first round, second round draft picks, and a lot of coaching changes. So there was just no consistency with the Buccaneers at all.
Yeah. You brought up head coach John McKay being there when you got drafted. I know he was the Bucs coach through 84, but during your brief time that you had with him, he was known to be a guy that always had a pretty memorable quote. He was definitely throwing quotes around that a lot of people remember and still get quoted to this day. I mean, I got to say, probably one of the funniest head coaches in Bucs history, but I wanted to ask you, do you have any quotes from John McKay that you remember either from practice, in the building, if you saw him around, or, anything he did or said that really sticks out to you? Because, I mean, he is a man of many stories, I'm sure.
Yeah, and probably all the quotes are the quotes that I know. I mean, they were all pretty legendary, and they certainly made the press. But, I can remember one time walking off the field, and I remember Coach McKay coming up to me, and this has a lot to do with my story that I'm going to tell later. But I remember him saying, Randy, you don't ever want to leave your glove on the mound because somebody's going to pick it up if you do. And I took that as meaning you do whatever you have to stay out here on the field. Okay. And don't get that reputation for being injury prone or always on the injured list or back there waiting to see the doctors. Don't be that person. And, that's always stuck with me. He didn't come right out and say, you stay out here on the field no matter what. But, that's what I took from that comment. And it's just always stuck with me. But Coach McKay was fair. He was a good coach. He had good people around him. And, he was a legend. Randy Grimes doesn't have to sell John McKay. John McKay sold himself, and he did a great job.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. As we kind of transition into your story beyond football, I think it kind of starts with that quote that you had brought up from John McKay. If you ask a lot of players from the era that you played, especially offensive and defensive linemen, it seems like that there was this warrior mentality about everybody, about, having to be on the field as much as you possibly can. And I think if you ask a lot of those guys, they'll tell you that painkillers were a really big part of the game. It was a part of your recovery. It was how you stayed in the game. And, over your career, you battled multiple concussions, surgeries, procedures, things you had to go through. And you kind of proved to be that guy who was able to stay out there no matter what. But where your story kind of starts here is how it followed you into your post-football career, and I'll let you kind of tell the rest.
Well, and one thing I was always good at, and I was keeping my mouth shut and listening, and when I got in that locker room at one Buck place my rookie year, I listened. I listened to the Jimmy Giles and the Doug Williamses and the Hugh Greens and the James Wilders, the guys that were year after year after year playing at a high level, because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be the best center that ever played the game. I wanted to play the game forever. I wanted to be all pro. I wanted to feed my family playing a kid's game. So one of the things I learned to do very early, well, the first thing I learned is that football was no longer a game. It was a business. And the second thing I learned was that you do whatever you have to stay out on the field, because if you're not out there in your position, somebody else was. So, you don't want to get that reputation, like I said earlier, of always being in line back there to be worked on by the trainers, or always on the injury report, or always missing practice. You didn't, because that was a reputation you were never going to get away from in what was sure to be a short career. So, I started taking handfuls of pain pills every day just to work through the injuries, to work through the pain I was having. And then I would take handfuls of sleeping pills at night to get to sleep through the throbbing pain. And I looked at it like it was a necessary evil. I mean, I'm getting it from the team trainers, right? So it must be okay. Or I'm getting it from team doctors, so it must be okay. Or I'm just getting it out of the team's drug safe. So, that must be the culture of the NFL. These are ways that I justified this, what I called a necessary evil, but really it was a full-blown addiction. And, that's how I justified staying out on that field and doing whatever I had to do. Did we just cut off, guys?
Your camera did, but your audio's still coming in.
Oh, wow. What happened here? My bad. Sorry.
No, don't be. You're all good. It happens. We got you back loud and clear.
So anyway, I never thought that I was going to take that necessary evil into my private life. And that's where things really spiraled out of control. When I didn't have those enablers anymore, those team doctors, team trainers, or ways to justify it. The injuries just kept getting worse. The chronic pain just kept getting worse. My addiction kept getting worse. It was, my tolerance was getting higher. So I needed more and more pain pills. And, for the next 20 plus years, I just couldn't stop the insanity that was, that is addiction.
Yeah. And for you to not only speak out after your experience, but to be a huge advocate for a lot of recovery guys nowadays, I think it goes unsaid, especially with a lot of players from that era. But for you to be the guy to speak out, like I said, you can't be alone on this. I'm sure that there are a lot of other players that are going through very similar situations, or guys who have gone through similar situations. And, I'm sure some of them fall into the group of maybe guys you've talked to, but now you are just a huge advocate for recovery. I mean, you do so much from a bunch of different organizations. You're a keynote speaker. You're a director of professional relations for the Transformations Drug and Alcohol Treatment Center. You're helping athletic teams, associations, healthcare groups, colleges, associations, corporations, families. You're going out of your way to help these people and to guide them into a road of recovery. And I think that, the story from beginning to end is really a good story and something that you don't hear of a lot, because I'm sure that there are plenty of older players who are still struggling or still in a very similar boat as to you were those years ago.
Well, you're exactly right. And when I came into treatment, this was September 22nd of 2009, when I finally got sober, finally put my hand up and asked for help, I knew I wanted to make it mean something. I knew that I wanted to, there was nothing out there for former players. And, it just so happens that whoever my wife called it in New York at the league office knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody. And that's how I got to the treatment center that I did back in 2009. But, there was nothing out there for former players. And I knew there was a lot of guys that I'd played with and guys that I'd played against who were out there suffering in silence. And for whatever reason, whether they pride, ego, shame, guilt, whatever it was, or they just thought that there was nobody else out there suffering like they were, they would not put up their hand and ask for help. So that's how, that was why I started Athletes in Recovery, started working with the NFL, the Player Care Foundation, the Alumni Association, the Players Union, working with those guys, helping former players find resources for not only their substance abuse, but the mental health issues that they were having post football. And, we were so successful. We were helping so many guys that Major League Baseball got involved with it, NBA, NHL. I work with so many former athlete groups now, the Jockeys Guild, the MMA, Motorsports Safety Group, the LPGA, the PGA, so many different groups and a lot of veteran organizations, because there's just so many similarities between what we're all going through. And they say trauma is the root of all addiction. Well, with my population, or the guys that I work with, it even goes back before that. And it's something to do with transitioning out of your sport or out of the service, or guys don't handle very well the fact that they don't have a uniform to put on anymore, that they don't have that locker room to sit in. People ask me all the time what I miss most about football, and it's not so much being out on the field as it is being in that locker room, being in there with the guys and hanging out with those guys. So, I'm just grateful that, all the pain and destruction that I caused my family and my friends and my jobs and my houses and cars and money, I just glad that I was able to make it all mean something and stay in this industry and help as many guys as I could.
So
listen, I'm at White Sands Treatment Center right in Plant City, not Transformations.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, that's
so take me back to 2009 here. You say, in 2009, September 22nd is when you finally said, enough's enough. Like, I need to get some help. What was the breaking point for you? When did you realize, like, hey, this is an issue that needs to be addressed?
Well, and it seems like the perfect storm was happening that spring and summer of 2009. My good friend Tom McKay passed away, and you all know that story. And, Tom was out there doing the exact same thing I was doing, self-medicating his injuries he got while he played with the Bucs. And one morning he just didn't wake up. So that really started getting my attention. I had also a series of seizures as a result of withdrawal from the benzodiazepines that I was taking, and also the opiates. So that was going on. And then also my daughter had her first child, which was my first grandchild, and she wouldn't let me come around him because I wasn't fit to be around my first grandbaby. So, it was the perfect storm was happening then. And it seems like every bottom I hit had a trap door in it. I always went lower. And so it was a result of all that happening in the spring and summer of 2009 that I finally said, you know what, I can't do it. I need help.
Now, you talked about your road of not only recovering for yourself, but being an advocate for other guys who are following that same path. What are some memories that stick out to you? Over your years of advocacy, I'm sure that you've worked with so many guys, so many players from so many different sports, as you had mentioned. Is there any story or any particular person that sticks out to you a little bit more than the next?
Well, yeah, there are. Obviously, I can't tell you who they are, so that kind of defeats it, But it's been great that I've been able to help a lot of guys that were legends to me, guys that I grew up watching. I've been able to help, and that's from all sports. I'm grateful for the opportunity there, but you know what? It's all the same stuff with every one of us, and it's all has to do with chronic pain, transitioning, and just not having that uniform to put on anymore. That's such a big deal. And, I'm grateful that I work with a great treatment center, White Sands Treatment Center there in Plant City. It's a dual diagnosis facility. We also have a location in Fort Myers and also a presence in Hyde Park there in Tampa. But you know what? The fact that we're such a good dual diagnosis facility, we treat more than just the substance abuse. We really dig into that underlying issue of what makes us do what we do with our addiction, whether it's depression or anxiety or some other kind of underlying mental health issue. We really dig in and find out what the root of that problem is. So I'm grateful for the staff at White Sands that they've been able to help the athletes like they have.
Now, I just want to bring it back to football for 1 second. You mentioned the thing you miss the most isn't necessarily playing the actual game, but it's the guys in the locker room. And I've heard that a lot from a lot of retired football players, and or just any sport. Guys really miss the locker room. What is so special about being inside that locker room? And do you have any cool stories or memories from inside the locker room in your playing days?
Well, and it's the camaraderie. I can remember we as offensive linemen, we would always go over about 2 or 3 hours before everybody else on game day. And we would just sit around as offensive linemen. We would take our time taping up our pads. We'd always put two-way carpet tape on it and then stick our jerseys to it. We took our time taping our ankles. We always taped our own ankles. We taped our wrists, and we would just sit around. I can remember some guys would have their Discman or Walkmans on, and it was that time together, knowing that we were fixing to be in the battle of our lives in there. So, it was just that camaraderie of being together, and after practices, after games. That locker room, that's where you want to be. That's where everybody's laughing. That's where everybody's cutting up, and that's where those bonds are being developed that last a lifetime. And I've got some great stories of Steve DeBerg. A lot of them I can't tell, but Steve DeBerg and Sean Farrell. I mean, we used to have some really great times, and we had some real characters. On defense with Cecil Johnson and Neil Cozy, and we had some great players that made a lot of memories over there. But Tampa, I wouldn't trade my time for anything in Tampa.
Now, I want to ask one more quick question. Obviously, you're in the creamsicle era. A lot of people hate them. A lot of people love them. What do you think about rocking the creamsicles on every Sunday?
Loved it. I loved it. And that was, that's the only Buccaneers I remember. I'm still trying to get used to all this red and crimson and Vermont and all that. But, and it seems like everybody I talk to loves the creamsicle too. So, I miss Buccaneer Bruce and the eye patch and all that. But, I'm glad where they are right now. I love to follow them. I'm still a huge supporter, and I'm excited about the Super Bowl.
Now, I believe coming up this offseason, we've got a new collective bargaining agreement, and I think one of the proposals on there is the NFL adjusting their helmet rule to allow for different color helmets. So I know that if that comes into play, Bruce Arians and even Tom Brady at this point have teased a return to the creamsicle for a game or two next season. But as of right now, we just got to wait and see how that CBA goes. But hopefully, I'm a big creamsicle fan, and I know Evan kind of likes them too. So we're both kind of in the corner of rooting for them to come back next year. One more question for you about this team. As we know, the Buccaneers next Sunday will play in Super Bowl 55, the first team ever to be the home team in the host city in the Super Bowl. I just wanted to get a little bit of a prediction for you, from you for the game. Bucs are going up against the Chiefs, and the last time these two teams met, I think the Bucs did a pretty good job of slowing down Kansas City's offense. They did a pretty tough attempt at slowing down Tyreek Hill, which is hard to do, but for the most part, I think they kept it a close game. They kind of came back in the second half, weren't able to get the job done. These are two very different teams this time around, and from what you've seen from this Bucs team over the playoffs, and from anything you've seen or heard from this Chiefs team this year, what kind of game are you expecting, and who do you ultimately think comes out on top?
Well, and you have to go back to the home field advantage, and that's always huge, whether it's a playoff game or a preseason game. So I'm really counting on that to work in our favor. I like Tom Brady in big games. Who doesn't? Yeah. I mean, look years consistently, game after game, big game after big game, and that's where my money is. Not literally, but I'm betting on that guy. I'm excited to watch Mahomes, and we're from the same hometown, so there's a little part of me that's hoping that he does well, but right now I'm going with the Bucs. I see them playing well. I know the defense is going to rise to the occasion, and if they don't, we're not going to have a chance, because I think the key is going to be with the defense.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you're actually thinking about putting some money on the game, I'm really glad our good friend Randy Grimes brought it up. It's a perfect time to check out our good friends over at betonline.ag. If you're betting on the Bucs in the Super Bowl, and go check out BetOnline. From game spreads and totals to team, player, and coaching props, BetOnline gives you more options to wager than any other place online. And of course, they've always got the online casino, which never closes. So head over to betonline.ag today. Take advantage of all the great sign-up bonuses. BetOnline, your online sportsbook expert. Support for CFP is also brought to you by Manscaped, the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Listen, we don't have to go into too much detail, but I think everybody in here can kind of agree that manscaping is just, it's a little tough sometimes. It gets hard down there. Sometimes it's hard to see. You're standing at a weird angle. But that's exactly why Manscaped has redesigned the electric trimmer. The Manscaped engineering team spent 1.5 years perfecting the greatest ball hair trimmer ever created, and they just released the new and improved Lawnmower 3.0. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code Cannon20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com, and use code Cannon20. Sorry about that. I had to get some sponsor stuff out of the way. One final question for you before we wrap up and break this thing down. You know, you do a lot of work as a recovery advocate, helping other guys kind of, take a similar path that you did. I wanted to ask, are there any projects that you're working on right now, or any particular foundations you're a part of that you'd like people to know about? Some of the work that you're doing recently that you would like people to hear about?
Well, I want everybody to go to my website at proathletesinrecovery.org. I don't want people to think that I only work with athletes. I'm an advocate for anybody seeking help from addiction and their mental health issues. So visit there. But also, I want everybody to check out the Victory Recovery High School that we just had the ribbon cutting for over in Newport Richey. And we're real excited about that. Again, it's Victory Recovery High School. Check that out, and all the help you could give us, we would appreciate. But there's so many cool things going on in recovery right now. We're doing so many things that are breaking down that wall of stigma that surrounds addiction. The message I want to send to everybody is that it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to not raise your hand and ask for help. This happens to a lot of people. Who would have ever thought that I would be, Mr. Second Round Draft Pick, Mr. 1988 NFL Man of the Year, Mr. All Southwest Conference and all that. Who would have ever thought that I would have had my substance abuse problems? And so it happens to anybody, but there's hope and there's help out there. All you have to do is raise your hand and ask for help.
It is awesome work that you do. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, proathletesinrecovery.org. Go check it out. Our good buddy Randy Grimes doing some awesome work and helping out with addiction recovery. Randy, I want to thank you so much for your time today and coming on the podcast. It's a very exciting time for Tampa Bay sports, and we got a lot of traction going with the podcast. That's why I figured it was the perfect time to bring you in here, and we're glad that you could tell your story just to have, a couple of people hear it. One last question. If there's somebody listening to this podcast who is, just kind of in a rough scenario, let's say they're battling with addiction, it may not even be, addiction with painkillers or a certain substance. It could be anything, any rough situation that they're in. If there's one thing you could say to that person right now who might be in that spot, what would it be?
That there is hope and help. People don't realize that that other people have struggled with this, and that we're here to help. And all you have to do is ask for help. You can get in touch with me real easy. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter at SoberCenter60. You can go to the website, but there is help and there's hope out there, and you don't have to live like this any longer.
Absolutely. Randy, once again, thank you for your time coming on the podcast again today. All the great work that you do. I'm glad we could get the word out, and it was a pleasure talking to you, my friend.
Thank you, buddy. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, that's just about going to do it for this episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Thank you guys so much for checking us out with video on YouTube, or of course, listening to us on any of our podcast outlets. We appreciate the love over there. Follow the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show, and of course, Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can go follow my co-host on Instagram at Bucs_daily, the #1 Buccaneers fan page on Instagram with 26,000 followers and climbing just in time for the Super Bowl. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL. And last but not least, you can find myself, Instagram and Twitter at Retticus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. With all that being said, I am your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, Evan Wanish, and our very special guest, Randy Grimes. We'll talk to you guys on Saturday as we interview Fox Sports' Chris Myers and get his thoughts on the Buccaneers playing in Super Bowl 55. Until then, we'll talk to you later, and go Bucs.